Hi everyone, this is 1 year on. I'm Alison. I'm following on from episode 20. Today's episode is about the daily life I had and things that became obsessions. I never thought I was one for being a person with obsessions, but I have had to admit that I have developed obsessive tendencies as a result of the stroke and its aftermath. My blood pressure, which previously had been a low 117/76, was very, very high in the hospital and required me to take blood pressure tablets and probably have to take them for the rest of my life. I became obsessed with taking readings of my blood pressure and recording them in my book. This book travelled with me to each and every medical appointment and became my record of things each practitioner told me, as my memory wasn't that great. It was in this book that I obsessively wrote down blood pressure readings each morning and afternoons. It was in the mornings that I had to take my blood pressure tablets, and so I would take my blood pressure reading on the monitor before I'd taken the tablets. It was kind of a counter to the medical profession of my blood pressure is just fine. I took my tablets 24 hours ago and look how low it is. I got very good at getting my blood pressure down to the systolic of 110. The systolic was what the medical profession's particularly worried about. Yes, the diastolic is a concern, but the first number is the more important one, I'm led to believe. I then had an appointment with my GP and discussed reducing my blood pressure medication, and she was happy to do it, as I had my data recorded for many months. The script was half the dose, and I started taking that to see how I was on it. Interestingly, the morning readings weren't as stable, and I decided to return to taking the first dose of the tablets. She was happy for me to do that, as I'd done this test on myself and agreed that my blood pressure wasn't as stable as before when I was taking the lower dose. Now, an interesting thing happened there, as I'd gotten the tablets muddled up and had been taking the lower dose blood pressure tablets and was feeling really shocking and had a really sore head, and then realised what I'd done, and I went back to the original dose and the headaches disappeared. That was very weird. I was also obsessed with having a set routine. Doing all my activities in a strict order meant I knew that they'd been done. I didn't have to remember if I'd done them, because if I followed the order of doing things like having a shower, drying my hair, then taking my morning tablets, getting breakfast, it was easy, repeatable and memorable. I still do these things in this order, even a year on. I did become obsessive about this. I also became obsessive about making notes. That was my way of giving myself a memory. As I keep saying, my memory wasn't something I could rely on. Making notes to myself meant I would do something I had said I would do, remember something someone had told me. It's just terrible not being able to rely on your memory, and I felt so completely useless because my memory was so poor. My husband got used to hearing me say, "I don't remember," when he reminded me of a conversation we'd had and that I had no recollection of. My memory has improved, although it's still a bit dicky at times. That was something I had a complete obsession about. I was also obsessed about keeping the house in complete silence just to relax. My husband loves music on in the background. He's got a very eclectic taste in music: bluegrass, banjo, Australian rock, folk, to name a few. And I just couldn't have it on in the early days. That has changed somewhat, but sometimes I just want peace, and I obsessively pursue that. I was also obsessed about how many steps I had taken in a day. I've got 8,000 as my target, and I've got an app on my phone which closes rings, and I was obsessed with seeing me achieve this each and every day. I remember one day when it was bucketing rain, and I walked back and forth 100 times at least from one end of the house to the other, holding my phone to get my steps up. I was obsessed about things that I ate. The neurologist in particular said I should eat as much fish as I could and eat as much non-processed foods and limited processed foods as I could. That was something I did religiously to the point of obsession. I've relaxed that a bit now, but my diet is very much still unprocessed foods and very minimally processed foods. I had to be obsessive about my medications as I've got so many to take. I would lay out the boxes on the left, and after I took them I would close each box and move them to the right. I still do this, although I use a basket now and a larger box to hold them. My breakfast is a large mix of ingredients including chia seeds, nuts, pepitas, and a whole host of other ingredients, and there is no way I can remember them all. So I line them up and move them across the table left to right once I've put them into my bowl. And then there was the obsession I had with playing the brain training apps. I'm yet to tell you fully about the Lumosity app and the brain training game Train of Thought, but I was so totally obsessed with it that I played over 1,000 times in a few weeks to advance to the final level and conquer it by getting to a level that I felt was good enough. I was so focused on that, I would do it to the exclusion of everything else. It was just something I had to do. I got to putting 50 trains to bed in the level, and then it became something I wasn't bothered about. It was interesting how I was able to put it down once I'd achieved my goal. All in all, I think I do have obsessive tendencies, and whilst they may sound very weird, they have enabled me to get to where I am in my recovery. I'm not proud of the chaos or inconvenience I created around me and the difficulties I made for others. That was the negative of me being like this. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe. I will be back next time to talk about going back to work and the early days.